Hey everybody, Chris with Clutter Reduction Junk Removal in Palm Beach County, Florida. And as of right now, give or take, I am in my 5-year milestone of business. And I was just watching one of my videos. I've made about 3 or 4 of these because I think they're important, which is going over the mistakes I've made in business from when I first began to where I am now. And I think it's important because you always see the highlight of business and the highlight of junk removal, and oh, you can make this much money every day. It's so easy to do. You don't need this, you don't need this. And it just sounds like a dream come true. Like it's just one of those easy things. And the job itself is, yes, you don't need to be a GC, you don't need to have any kind of skill or trade really. I mean, you can be good at what you're doing and get better over time and more efficient, but there's not too much to it that's like a specialty that you need to learn and acquire skills of. So yes, it is a easy concept, but that doesn't mean that running a business is. Even just running it as a side hustle, to like really run it as a side hustle, is still very stressful. And there's just a lot that goes into it, and I don't feel like it gets talked about a lot. And I think it's good to reflect back on those things, and therefore I've made a couple of videos in the past. I'll try to tag them up throughout the video if you guys want to check out to kind of see how I've progressed over time. You'll probably see a lot of repeats, which we're going to talk about. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of my top mistakes I've made from when I started and what's kind of been a little bit more recent. So as I mentioned, I made a few videos talking about mistakes up to those points in the past. My latest one, I think, was about a year and a half ago. And now we're kind of doing it in this like 5-year mark. So we have had some changes this year in the business. My wife has joined me full time. We got a more heavy duty truck with the intention of getting a better trailer. And we had something come up that I can't talk about quite yet, but eventually we'll get that figured out. Other than that though, not too much has really changed. We've done really well this year in terms of income, but as far as like my core concept and foundation, it hasn't been what I would have expected based on those videos I made in the past going over my mistakes. So the first thing I want to mention is inconsistency. And this could be for marketing, this could be following up with clients and estimates, this could be networking groups. And the big thing is I have a inconsistent growth mindset. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on in the video. But for me personally, when it comes to inconsistency, when I say marketing, I'm talking like social media, yard signs, door hangers. I have like probably 1,000 door hangers in my cabinet right here, and I have like 1,000 of these. I think I've put out like maybe 12, to be honest with you. And that's just something I've always done. I buy all these flyers and door hangers and all these like postcards, and then I don't use them, or like I'll use them for like a little bit and then I stop. And like there's nothing keeping me from continuing them on. But that is something that I tend to kind of fall off the wagon on quickly, and I'll revisit it every now and then. But that is one of my flaws. And that also goes with business to business marketing. That is one of our major ways that we do our marketing. We go buy places. We don't do ads on Facebook or ads on Google. But we're not the most consistent with repeating the visits to these places that we go to once. So that's something that I'm very inconsistent with. And then follow-ups. I used to be really good at following up with people back in the first couple of years. So if I had an estimate I went to go do, or maybe I did a job for somebody and while I was there they said, hey, I'm probably going to be doing some work around the house in like next month, so I might have you come back. What I would do is like a month later, I would reach out and say, hey, the last time I was at your job, you mentioned that you're going to be doing work around the house and you may need me to come back. I just wanted to check in on you to see how that's going. Is that something that you're actively doing and you want me to come by in a couple of weeks? Just kind of play with the waters. And every couple of people I would do that with, I would usually get a job out of it. Maybe they forgot, right? Or it just wasn't on their forefront of their mind, but now it is. And the same concept with giving estimates. I used to give an estimate, I would reach out the next day, sometimes the same day later in the afternoon, or a couple of days later and say, hey, just want to follow up with that estimate. Is that something you want to go ahead and book with us, or did you find somebody else? Now I kind of do it, but not as frequently as I should. And I'm sure we probably lose jobs on that too. Somebody probably gets a couple of other quotes. Maybe they're all competitive, but maybe the last person they see, by the time they get there, they're like, hey, this kind of sucks. I don't want to keep calling people. I'm just going to go with you. Screw it. You're 50 bucks more, but you're here. And obviously that could hurt us because we probably could have been competitive and got the job. As far as networking groups, that's another big thing that we do. But even in the groups we're in, we're not as consistent as we could be. We could be going to multiple locations and seeing people more often. We really see most people every quarter. They have like a big mixer where all the groups meet at one place, and then you're like, oh, hey, I haven't seen you in like 6 months. How you doing? They still know who we are. They know what we do. But because we're not seeing them every day, I feel like that is something that people will tend to forget about you in the moment that it's needed. You ever watch those like trivia shows or people on YouTube in the streets and they're like, hey, we're going to give you a quick quiz, 5 super simple questions. And you're watching the video and like they're like over here like freezing and you're like, are you stupid? But it's because you're kind of frozen on the moment. It's kind of caught off guard. So if somebody we haven't seen in 5 months are like, hey, I'm going to be moving soon. I have all this crap. You know anybody who's interested in furniture? They may not be thinking, if they haven't seen us in a while, oh, Chris and Tanya do junk removal. This would probably be a good information to provide. They may not be thinking about that. They might say, oh, I think there's that place down the street that maybe buys it. And if they don't, they'll probably get it for donation. And they don't even cross the path of junk removal. So that's something that we aren't as consistent with as we could be. And then the last thing with inconsistency is growth mindset. I have these ideas of, wanting to grow the business and, maybe get an employee and get a bigger, better truck, or get a more compact truck, or, do something a little differently that can yield in more results. And we get to that point and then it kind of just falls off the wagon. And it's a flaw of mine. So that's something that I struggle with still to this day, even 5 years in. The next thing is going to directly revolve around those videos I made in the past, and that is not correcting my previous mistakes. It's so funny. Every now and then I like to go back and watch those videos all the way back to I think my second year in is when I made my first one, and I talk about the mistakes I made. And some of them are just progression, right? Others, though, are still things that I don't do to this day, and I'm familiar with it. I just don't do it. And that's something that, it literally came out of my mouth in the moment at some point in my journey, and I know of it, and I still have not corrected it. And sometimes they're minor mistakes, and they're it's whatever. Sometimes it's this couldn't be a big change for us, and it could bring in more jobs. It could make this easier. It could make this more affordable, and I just don't do it. So that's something that I have to work on with myself. The third thing is kind of going off of that growth mindset hindrance. I have a very stationary mindset. I didn't get into business with the intention of opening up a franchise and making hundreds of thousands of dollars and having people do work for me so I can just sit at home and not do anything. I never got into it for that. I honestly wanted to make my own schedule. And I know hiring employees is the perfect example of that, but that's not all that it means to me. So I came from the moving industry, working 6-7 days a week, and you can go into work at 7 and you think you're gonna get off of work at 3, and then all of a sudden you get a little notification on your phone hey, you have another job, go ahead to this next place. And then you don't get back home, it's 8 o'clock. You have no say in the matter. And then before that, I worked at a catering company, and for 7 to 8 months of the year, I worked 110-hour weeks on average. And I was doing 30-minute power naps in the middle of the night. At least half the week, I never went home. I would stop home quick to shower, but for the most part, I would just sleep at the catering shop because I would literally just be working through the night, prepping all this stuff. It was like a 4-man job, and they had me do it by myself for some fucking reason. It was miserable. I like the attention to detail and the organization, but everything else is miserable, and I was not a happy camper. So I always had a terrible schedule. I was always missing birthday dinners and events and holiday parties because there is no day off in catering, even on Christmas Day and all those things. And it caused a lot of problems with my family and myself. So and like, I don't know, like, if you have a 9 to 5, you have PTO, right? Like, you're paying basically to take a day off, which is crazy, unless you're on salary, I guess. But I just never had those options. Like, if I took off, I just wasn't like making money, and that's fine too. You know, like if I like wanted to go on a trip next weekend or something, or in 3 weeks from now, if I got invited for something, I have to request off, and then you don't even know if you're gonna get off. That was the crazy part. And now it's like, oh, we want to go out of town? Cool. We're just not going to book jobs for this period of time, and then we're gone. Yes, we're losing money because nobody is working for us while we're like out of town, but I have that freedom now. And for me, that is really what I kind of want. And of course, again, I could hire employees and have them work for us, and then we have all the time of the day to do what we want to do to advance as a couple, my wife and I. But again, stationary mindset. I don't have that growth vision. I don't have that go get employees, go get multiple trucks, take that loan and get yourself situated and then run with it. And if it fails, it fails. It happens every day. I don't have that mindset. I have a very stationary mindset. But I would argue that is a mistake. The next thing, fear of employees. I just don't love the idea of employees. I hear it all the time. It's a necessary evil, but it's a double-edged sword at the same time. They're going to help you out and they're going to help you build your business, but then they're also going to be the most stressful, pain in the ass part of owning a business. And honestly, I don't know, like you hear about like, Matt and Jojo from Sonoma Strong, how, like you get that one full-time guy and he's just perfect, right? Just right off the bat, he's perfect. And like I know a couple of people, like they've had 1, maybe 2 employees, and they're just good apples right off the tree and they never have a problem, and they end up becoming partners in the business. I've only had one 1099, and if he didn't already do freelance work and make more money than the business does for us, then he'd probably be our perfect fit. But that's not the situation. And working with people, and then even he does moving, he struggles all the time. He's like, hey, I had this guy booked out for a week and he went to go find a job. So now I'm screwed. Or like, oh, this kid was supposed to come here and he texted me he was on his way, they never showed up, never heard from him again. Until like a week later, he's like, oh yeah, my bad. Like, I don't know. I get nervous about like employees stealing on the job or cursing out your client because they're having a bad day. I don't know. I just don't want to deal with all the headache, the insurance and liability, and just it drives me away so much. The next thing, I've talked about this a little bit in my last one, and it's about budgeting and finance. I don't really budget. I keep track of everything. Like every job that comes through, I write down how much I pay for disposal. If I hire out labor, how much I pay for labor, how much was my credit card transaction fee if there was one, how much did we make in tip. I do the breakdown of how much I pull for my pay, how much we set aside for profit and tax, and then how much stays for operation expenses for just everyday, costs. Everything gets broken down. I have everything organized on QuickBooks, but I don't really budget by category. Like I don't have a set budget for marketing, a set budget for like dining if we're going to go meet with a client or go meet with a realtor or something for coffee or dinner. I don't have categories for that with set limits. And I feel like that hurts us because, we may go to like 10 networking events one month and you're bound to get food or drinks or something. And all of a sudden you're spending $10 here, $40 there, $100 here, $30 there. And all this money adds up and you don't think about it in the moment because you're working all the time. And you're like, okay, well, this is networking, this is marketing, blah, blah, blah. And the problem is that while that's all true and it's all a proper tax write-off, well, 50% for meals, but it adds up. And I think one month we hit like 1,100 in food. And to me, that was just a lot. We're not making like, $500,000. So to me, like a little over $1,000 a month is a lot for food. And it's because we went out to dinner with a realtor for 2 different people. We went out to multiple networking groups. We met with multiple business owners, and it's just a lot of business expenses. But things like that, like if we had a set limit, like, okay, we can go out and do these things, but let's not go crazy with ordering, or let's try to limit where we're going to or how often we go out. And I think just doing that for different like equipment and marketing material, food and dining, or I don't know, upgrades for the business or something. Like just try to make a budget for everything so you're not overspending in any category. The next thing is I never really worked on my sales skills other than experience. So since I started, I've learned like things to watch out for, and kind of build a human interaction of kind of seeing cues, like social cues, and certain questions that start to divert the situation. And like I've learned those over time, but I've never really just sat there and like learned how to better my sales. Like I've read a lot of books about leadership and scheduling and focusing on certain tasks in business and marketing and stuff like that. I've never learned sales though, and I feel like it's really important. So like if you could learn, better persuasive, or how to connect better, or how to ask the right questions, or how to answer the questions correctly, I think a lot of that goes a long way, especially with estimates and with talking to people. At networking events, you're selling yourself. It's not just communication. So I definitely think I need to work on my sales just in general, and not just for like estimates, like I mentioned, but for just everyday business. And then the last thing is what I believe they call analysis something, where you spend too much time focusing on one subject, and you end up going down like this rabbit hole. It's freaking sitting right here in my mind. I can't think of it. Something analysis. Crazy. But I spend a lot of time on ideas I have, and sometimes like it's just like a half hour and I'll sit here and research it. I'm like, maybe not. Sometimes I spend hours going through something. I'm like, oh, I want to change the website. I want to add this to it. I want to take this away. I want to update my business card. I want to do this on social media. I want to set up a schedule for posts, or let's look into getting this truck or doing this trailer, or do trailer rentals, or oh, hey, let's focus on this niche, or let's focus on these people for our target audience. And these are all very valid points for business, but what it ends up doing is I'm spending hours and hours and hours every week, every month, going over all this stuff, and 90% of it never happens, and probably 50% of it doesn't need to happen. It's just an idea that pops in my head, and I'm like, oh, that might be interesting, and I spend a lot of time on it. And not only do I spend time on it in the moment, but it takes up a lot of mental capacity, and then it stays back here somewhere in my head. So when something else comes up that's similar to that situation, in my head, I'm like, oh, wait a second, I think I've thought about this before in the past. Now, I may have, but maybe now I'm seeing it with a different viewpoint. And because I've studied it in the past, I'm just going to bypass it. Whereas maybe now it's a better situation to kind of latch on to, and I feel like that probably causes a lot of problems. So that is another thing that I deal with. And I would say overall, those are pretty much all of my top mistakes that I continuously make. And hopefully by doing an updated video and acknowledging that I don't correct my previous mistakes, hopefully now I can try to actually fix that. So that is something that I need to work on. And I will say, just based on this last year, some of the changes we have made and or things we've done that I would encourage you to do, because we're in business Make sure you have a contact for different categories of professionalism. So make sure, I would assume you have a CPA. I think everyone should have a CPA for business. There's a lot that goes into it that's past surface level. But having something like QuickBooks or something similar that can track all your expenses has been a huge game changer for us. I started it this year, and I never used to have a profit loss statement. I'd have to add it all up myself. Now I just go on and I can print it out for every single month, and that is honestly fantastic. So I definitely recommend something along those lines. The next thing is to make sure you have a contact for different attorneys or lawyers for different categories. So for example, we got contracts made up earlier this year because we have had 2 problems with clients, and they were things that never turned into a legal situation, but they were heading in that direction. So we had contracts made up, and I could have just gone online and made some BS junk removal contract. You can Google junk removal contract. It'll pull you up an actual legit sounding contract, and you fill in your own information. But whether or not that holds up in court, if it made it that far, different story. So we had one professionally made up by an attorney that we know that can handle business law and all that stuff. And we had it drafted up for different situations. So we have one for large jobs and like cleanouts, and we have one for if we do our one-on-one decluttering. We have one for credit card authorization, and then we have one for something else I don't use often, so I don't remember off the top of my head. But honestly, that's something that just made me feel so much better. And it's not foolproof, of course, but if we go do like a $7,000-8,000 job, which is a lot to us, I can have them sign this contract, and I just know deep down, like, okay, I have that taken care of. So now if they try to backfire on us, at least I have something I can hold against them. And I have an attorney I can reach out to with any questions to say, hey, so we just got done doing this job. They did sign the contract, and now they're refusing to pay, or they're saying we took something we weren't supposed to take. How can we go about this? And I have somebody who can give me proper legal advice to take care of that. In addition, I encourage you to reach out and try to make a connection with different types of attorneys. For example, maybe a personal injury attorney. So if you ever get into a car accident, or if you have a slip and fall on a job, or you're at a commercial building, something happens, it's good to have a attorney you can reach out to nip it in the butt as soon as possible, because this isn't just you anymore. This is your business, and it could be much trickier. So that's something we're currently dealing with. Not going to get into detail, but I highly encourage that you meet those legal people and you build that connection, even if you end up never needing them, and I hope you don't, but it's good to know in case you do. That is something I just wanted to share really quick. And that's going to be it. So those are my 5 years in business, my top mistakes. Some of them are repetitive, which obviously I need to work on, and some of them are newer and or more recent realizations. And maybe there's some things I'm just ignorant with, and maybe there's some things I'm just stubborn and I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to fucking do that, So one day I will fix it, or I won't. And, that'll directly affect us and our business in the future. So hopefully we fix it in a positive way. And that's it for me. So if you don't mind, comment down below a couple of things that you have found over your span of business time that you make mistakes on, and how long have you been in business. And hey, if anything I read off, if you have advice on, if you dealt with personally, I'm open to criticism or advice, more so advice. I don't think you should be criticized on mistakes, but open to advice. But that is it for me, Chris, Clutter Reduction, Junk Removal, Palm Beach County, Florida. Hope everybody's staying busy this holiday season, and I hope everybody has a great holiday. When's Thanksgiving? Sometime next week? 2 weeks? I don't know what day Thanksgiving's on. Today's the 16th. My calendar doesn't tell me. Okay. Well, hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving if you celebrate it. And what else is there? Christmas. We'll see you guys before that. So that is it. Goodbye.